Imagine this for a moment. The very response you believe will finally make a narcissist suffer could actually be the reaction they have been anticipating all along. You may think that blocking them, begging them to understand, sending one last emotional message, or desperately trying to prove your value will finally put you back in control. In reality, none of those actions give you the power you imagine they will. There is one particular response that completely transforms the psychological balance between you and them. It does not require revenge. It does not involve winning an argument, and it certainly does not require speaking to them one more time. By the end of this, you will understand why this quiet internal change completely destroys the hold they once had over your life. Many people mistakenly believe the battle with a narcissist takes place through text messages, phone calls, social media posts, or emotionally charged face to face confrontations. That is not where the real conflict exists. The true struggle is happening inside your own nervous system. That is where manipulation takes hold. That is where confusion grows. And most importantly, that is where your freedom begins. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing they must somehow persuade the narcissist to recognize and admit the pain they have caused. That moment is unlikely. It is not because they cannot hear what you are saying, but because genuine accountability threatens the carefully crafted identity they spend so much energy protecting. If you have ever wondered why every conversation leaves you feeling even more confused, why every search for closure only creates new questions, or why walking away feels harder than remaining in the relationship, then this message is meant for you. Today, we are going to uncover what truly happens when you stop playing the game altogether. Many people believe blocking a narcissist is the ultimate way to reclaim their power. While there are absolutely situations where blocking is necessary to protect your safety, support your healing, or stop ongoing abuse, it is important to understand that pressing the block button alone is not what creates real power. The deeper question is whether blocking comes from genuine emotional freedom or whether it is simply another move in an exhausting emotional battle that still revolves around the narcissist. Lance. If you block them but spend the rest of the day wondering whether they noticed, checking if they are trying to contact you another way, or hoping they are finally feeling guilty for what they did, then your emotional energy is still connected to them. Physical distance may exist, but the psychological bond remains fully intact. This is why pressing a single button rarely brings the peace so many people expect. Your mind continues replaying old. It keeps imagining future encounters and remains trapped in the search for validation that may never come. Uh, the narcissistic relationship was built around keeping your attention fixed on their behavior. Unfortunately, that unhealthy pattern can continue long after communication has officially ended. In many situations, the real challenge is not cutting off contact, but breaking your emotional dependence on their approval or their explanation. The most powerful psychological transformation happens when your choices are no longer influenced by what the narcissist thinks or how they might respond. Whether you decide to block them or leave the digital door technically open becomes far less significant than reaching the point where their behavior no longer controls your emotional state. Once you arrive there, your attention naturally returns to your own life, your own goals, and your own recovery. That internal shift changes everything because your stability no longer depends on their reaction, I'm their silence, or their repeated attempts to pull you back into their world. When people have been deeply wounded by a narcissist, the natural instinct is to explain their pain, beg for understanding, or ask for one final conversation that will finally make everything make sense. That feels reasonable because healthy relationships often improve through honest and respectful communication. The problem is that narcissistic relationships operate by an entirely different set of rules. Every attempt to plead or search for closure often communicates something the narcissist values far more than your actual words. It tells them they still occupy an important place in your emotional life. Lands your continued pursuit reassures them that they still possess the ability to influence your thoughts, your emotions, and your decisions. That is exactly why emotional appeals so often end in disappointment. Rather than responding with genuine empathy, a narcissist will usually dismiss your feelings, redirect the conversation, blame you for the conflict, or offer just enough calculated kindness to keep you emotionally attached and invested in them. The discussion slowly stops being about solving the real problem and instead becomes another chance for them to reinforce their control over the emotional dynamic. You walk away feeling ignored, dismissed, and emotionally invalidated, while they leave knowing they still have complete access to your attention. Constantly seeking closure also creates a deeply unhealthy imbalance. Without real, you place your sense of self-worth into the hands of someone who has repeatedly shown little concern for protecting it. The more you ask them to acknowledge your experience, the more authority you unknowingly give them to shape your reality. This keeps you trapped in a painful cycle where every unanswered text, every delayed response, and every cold or distant interaction feels intensely personal. So, real healing begins the moment you stop expecting the person who caused the emotional injury to become the one who repairs it. Closure is not something they hand to you during one perfect conversation. It is something you gradually create for yourself by accepting the truth of what happened, trusting your own experiences, and refusing to keep chasing validation from someone who has consistently used it to maintain control over you. One of the most valuable lessons to learn is the difference between genuine emotional detachment and a simple emotional reaction. On the surface, two people may appear to be behaving exactly the same. Both stop replying to messages. Both avoid unnecessary conflicts. Both create physical distance. Yet internally, they are experiencing completely different psychological realities. One person is secretly hoping the narcissist will finally notice, apologize, or return. The other has truly redirected their attention away from the narcissist and toward rebuilding their own future. The behavior may appear identical from the outside, but the foundation beneath it is entirely different. Narcissistic relationships often train people to react instead of reflect. Every criticism, every confusing mixed signal, and every rare moment of affection conditions your nervous system to remain constantly alert. You begin watching their moods, anticipating their next move, and adjusting your own behavior in an attempt to avoid conflict or earn their approval. Over time, this constant emotional vigilance becomes completely exhausting. Yet it also starts to feel strangely familiar. Even after the relationship is ended, your mind may continue responding as though the narcissist is still directing your emotional world. Manda, emotional detachment is what finally breaks this cycle. It does not mean becoming cold, uncaring, or emotionally numb. It simply means recognizing that your inner peace no longer depends on their opinions, their approval, or their unpredictable behavior. Instead of asking what they might be thinking, you begin asking what you truly need. Instead of spending endless hours analyzing every message or every moment of silence, you invest that mental energy into your healing, your healthy relationships, and your own personal growth. This internal shift is incredibly powerful because it removes the narcissist from the center of your psychological world. They may continue using the same familiar tactics to provoke guilt, awaken curiosity, or revive hope. But those strategies lose most of their power when your emotional stability is no longer tied to their actions. Your attention belongs to you again. And when you reclaim your attention, you also regain the freedom to make decisions based on your own values instead of constantly reacting to someone else's behavior. Silence carries a much deeper meaning in a narcissistic relationship than it does in a healthy one. When you stop feeling the need to explain yourself or seek their validation, you are doing far more than walking away. You are taking back ownership of your own story. Many people believe that if they stop reaching out, the other person will eventually reflect on what happened, recognize what they have lost, and sincerely wonder where everything went wrong. That expectation comes naturally from relationships built on empathy, trust, and mutual respect. A narcissist, however, interprets silence very differently. They often view it through the lens of control, status, and emotional influence rather than genuine human connection. Their first concern is rarely an honest reflection on your feelings or the pain you experienced. Instead, their first concern is usually what your silence means for their ability to keep influencing your attention. That is why silence often triggers reactions that seem surprising or even confusing. Some narcissists may suddenly reach out with overwhelming affection, empty apologies, or sentimental messages carefully designed to draw you back in. Others may act completely unaffected, immediately shifting their attention to someone else. Some may even resort to subtle manipulation or indirect tactics in an effort to provoke a response. It is important to understand that these behaviors are not reliable signs of sincere reflection or meaningful personal growth. In most cases, they are simply attempts to determine whether the familiar emotional pattern can still be reestablished. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that any reaction from the narcissist proves they have finally changed or recognized your worth. In reality, your silence merely interrupts the predictable pattern they had come to expect. When someone who was once emotionally available suddenly becomes unavailable, the script they relied upon no longer works the way it once did. That uncertainty may encourage them to experiment with different behaviors, but those reactions should never be mistaken for genuine inner transformation. Silence is most powerful when it is not being used as a strategy to force the narcissist into reacting. If your silence is simply another way of secretly hoping they will chase after you, then your emotional attention is still centered on them. So, authentic silence reflects a firm internal decision to step away from unhealthy and emotionally draining cycles. Whether the narcissist notices, ignores, responds to, or attempts to break that silence becomes far less important because your emotional direction is no longer determined by their response to your absence. Commander. If this discussion is helping you recognize patterns that once seemed impossible to explain, take a moment to subscribe and leave a comment below with the word freedom. It lets me know you are choosing clarity instead of confusion and making a commitment to your own emotional healing. Now let us continue. That's one of the greatest misconceptions after leaving a narcissistic relationship is believing that your recovery depends on understanding exactly what the narcissist is doing, thinking, or feeling. It is easy to become consumed by questions such as, have they moved on? Do they miss me? Will they ever regret what happened? Although they quietly keep your attention fixed on the very person you are trying to leave behind. Your thoughts remain centered on their decisions rather than your own growth, allowing the emotional connection to survive long after the relationship itself has ended. Man's your attention is one of the most valuable psychological resources you possess. Uh, Wherever you consistently place that attention, your emotions, energy, and mental focus naturally follow. Narcissistic relationships often condition you to prioritize another person's needs, moods, and reactions while neglecting your own. You become highly skilled at monitoring their emotional state, but gradually lose connection with your own inner world. Even after the relationship ends, that habit can remain, making it difficult to rediscover your identity outside the relationship. Blind reclaiming your attention means intentionally bringing your focus back to yourself. Um, Instead of checking whether they viewed your social media posts or wondering if they are speaking about you behind your back, you begin asking healthier and more productive questions. What activities genuinely bring you peace? Which friendships deserve more of your time and energy? What personal dreams or goals were neglected while the relationship consumed your emotional life? Questions like these redirect your energy toward rebuilding your future instead of reliving your past. And the remarkable result of this shift is that your emotional world becomes far less reactive and much more intentional. You stop measuring your progress according to the narcissist's behavior and begin measuring it by your own growing sense of peace, confidence, self respect. As your attention returns to your values, your health, and your future, the narcissist slowly loses the central position they once occupied in your mind. That creates the space needed to build a life that is no longer defined by either their presence or their absence. Blonde. One of the most meaningful transformations you can experience after leaving a narcissistic relationship is becoming emotionally unpredictable. This does not mean playing mind games or trying to manipulate anyone. It simply means you stop responding according to the familiar patterns that once kept you emotionally trapped. Narcissistic relationships often depend on your predictable emotional responses. Over time, the narcissist learns exactly what will make you explain yourself, what will push you to defend your intentions, what will convince you to forgive too quickly, and what will cause you to seek their reassurance. They begin anticipating your reactions and use that knowledge to maintain control over the relationship. Gradually, the connection becomes less about genuine love or mutual respect and more about managing your emotions for their own benefit. As long as you continue responding in those familiar ways, the cycle remains unbroken. If criticism always sends you searching for their approval, or if silence always leads you to contact them first, the narcissist can confidently rely on those patterns. They do not need to know exactly what you are thinking because they already know how you are likely to react. that predictability gives them a powerful sense of influence. Men becoming emotionally unpredictable does not mean acting impulsively, withholding affection to manipulate someone, or trying to make the narcissist jealous. It means your decisions are no longer controlled by fear, guilt, or the constant need for their validation. Sometimes this means choosing not to respond immediately. Other times it means refusing to justify yourself, declining to participate in endless circular arguments, or calmly enforcing your boundaries without feeling obligated to defend them. Your choices become guided by your own values instead of their expectations. So, lesbians. At first, this change may feel unfamiliar because you are no longer functioning in survival mode. Rather than constantly searching for signs of conflict or trying to prevent the next emotional crisis, you begin responding thoughtfully instead of reacting automatically. The narcissist may find this confusing because the familiar script they once depended on no longer works. However, the true value of this transformation is not found in their reaction. It lies in the fact that your emotional life is no longer organized around anticipating or managing another person's behavior. Instead, you begin rediscovering a sense of stability that comes from within rather than from external approval. When a narcissist no longer receives emotional fuel, the entire relationship begins to change in ways that many people misunderstand. Emotional fuel includes the attention, admiration, conflict, reassurance, fear, and emotional intensity that keeps you psychologically connected to them. It makes little difference whether the attention is positive or negative. Heated arguments, heartfelt apologies, repeated explanations, and desperate attempts to be understood can all strengthen the connection because they reassure the narcissist that they still occupy an important place in your emotional world. And as that steady source of emotional engagement begins to disappear, the narcissist may react in different ways. Some suddenly become unusually charming, affectionate, or apologetic. Others become more critical, attempt to provoke jealousy, spread rumors, or create situations designed to pull you back into conflict. Although these behaviors appear very different, they often serve the same purpose. They are attempts to discover whether they still have the power to influence your emotions and restore the familiar dynamic that once existed. Mendel. It is essential not to mistake these reactions for genuine personal growth or sincere remorse. Temporary kindness after losing influence is not the same as real accountability. Lasting change requires consistent self awareness, genuine empathy, and a willingness to accept responsibility over time rather than simply adopting new tactics when the old ones stop working. Lamps. As your attention becomes less available to them, the most meaningful transformation actually takes place within you. Once you stop providing emotional fuel, your mind becomes less consumed with anticipating the narcissist's next move. You begin sleeping more peacefully, thinking with greater clarity, and making decisions based on your own priorities instead of constantly operating in emotional survival mode. Gradually, the relationship loses its psychological hold because your attention is no longer sustaining the cycle. The greatest mistake many people make after leaving a narcissistic relationship dot is believing that true victory comes from changing the narcissist. It does not. Real victory comes from transforming the relationship you have with yourself. The moment you stop chasing explanations, stop measuring your worth through their attention, and stop waiting for them to become the person you always hoped they would be? You reclaim the one thing they never should have controlled in the first place, your inner peace. Whether you choose to block them, maintain firm boundaries, or simply refuse to engage is a deeply personal decision that depends on your own circumstances. What matters most is the intention behind that choice. If your decision comes from confidence, self respect, and a commitment to your own healing rather than fear or unresolved anger, you are already moving toward lasting freedom. Keep investing in yourself, continue strengthening your inner resilience, and with time, you will build the peaceful life you truly deserve.